Imagine being in a courtroom and watching a teenage boy walk in like he's arrived at a comedy show. Not nervous, not confused, but actually amused. That is the detail that stuck with every single person who sat in that courtroom in Birmingham, because it wasn't the gravity of the charges that shocked people. It was the fact that he didn't respect them. It was the fact that he found the entire situation entertaining. At 17 years old, most teenagers are still figuring out who they are, what path they want, what they believe in. Callum Ridge already thought he had the world figured out. He believed he could do anything he wanted, say anything he wanted, and there would always be a way out. His mother had spent years smoothing over the consequences of his actions. Teachers had looked the other way. Other kids had been too scared to challenge him. And in that type of environment, something dangerous happens. A teenager starts to believe they're untouchable. And when someone like that feels embarrassed or challenged, they do not let it go. The story doesn't begin with a robbery. It doesn't begin with a drug debt or a gang rivalry. It begins with something extremely small. A moment where Callum Ridge felt humiliated. A moment that he could not accept. Because in his mind, humiliation demanded revenge. And the man who unknowingly triggered all of this was a 51-year-old community volunteer named Martin Geller. He ran youth workshops in the Selly Park area. He wasn't a counselor. He wasn't a police officer. But he genuinely believed in guiding young people away from trouble and into something better. Martin wasn't a confrontational person, but he did not tolerate arrogance, and that's exactly what brought him face to face with Callum. During one of his weekly drop-in sessions, Callum tried to impress some of the younger teenagers by mocking something Martin had said. Callum expected everyone to laugh. He expected Martin to just shrug it off. But Martin didn't. He calmly challenged Callum in front of the group. He questioned him. He pushed back. And Callum didn't have the answers. That moment lasted seconds. But in Callum's mind, it lasted forever. The rest of the room forgot about it within minutes. Callum didn't. For the rest of the evening, he was completely silent. He left without saying goodbye to anyone. He barely acknowledged his own friends. Because inside his head, a decision was already forming. Callum couldn't take back the humiliation. He couldn't erase the moment from the memory of the younger boys who saw it. So in his mind, there was only one thing left to do. He had to reverse the power dynamic. He had to hurt the person who made him feel small. Callum started isolating himself more over the next few days. People around him thought he was just in a bad mood. But inwardly, he wasn't angry. He was planning. He was calculating. He wasn't thinking about consequences. He was thinking about how to reestablish control. And that mindset is where everything began to spiral. As the week went on, small clues of his thought process emerged in subtle ways. His mother noticed he was quieter, but she assumed he was just tired from college work. Friends noticed he was more sarcastic than usual, but assumed he was just messing around. But Callum wasn't hiding something impulsive. He wasn't suppressing rage. He was feeding it. In the privacy of his room, he replayed the moment with Martin in his head over and over again. And in his mind, he rewrote the ending. In his imagination, Martin didn't get the last word. He did. And that internal fantasy gave him something toxic, a sense of control, a sense that he could reverse the embarrassment. And the more he fed that fantasy, the more believable it felt. Until eventually, the fantasy felt like reality. One night, Callum's mother overheard him muttering to himself. She asked who he was talking to. He said no one. She assumed he was on a call or practicing lyrics or rehearsing a joke. She didn't question it further. Because deep down, she believed her son was harmless. She believed he was clever. She believed he was misunderstood, not dangerous. And that belief was one of the reasons why Callum's internal narrative never got challenged. No one in his life ever said the words that would have changed everything. You are wrong. So he continued to sit in that belief, and the belief hardened. He began searching online for stories of teenagers who had committed serious offenses and received surprisingly lenient sentences. He convinced himself that being a minor protected him. He convinced himself that the system would bend. Because he had seen the system bend for him before, Callum truly believed that if he crossed a line, it could be undone, that consequences were flexible, that he could outsmart adults, that he could outsmart the police. He believed that everything had a loophole. So his behavior became bolder. He made comments to a couple of friends about. By the time Callum sat in that interview room, the most disturbing thing to detectives was how relaxed he was, as if this was all just a slight delay in his day. He leaned back, calm, bored, certain he could outtalk everyone. But the detectives didn't push, they didn't argue, they didn't rush. They just repeated the same small, simple questions over and over again, and for the first time, the confidence in Callum's eyes began to slip. He realized he wasn't controlling anything anymore, and nobody in that room was impressed by him. They were just waiting, letting him talk himself into a corner. And the moment that snapped his entire attitude in half wasn't a piece of evidence. It was when one detective leaned forward and said in a low, quiet voice, "You think this is a game, but you don't get to walk out when you're bored. You're here until we're done." And just like that, the smirk disappeared. That was the first crack.